So the first step we'll be going over today is how to download and complete your eClaim form. So we will see we're on step one. So the first thing we'll need to do is download the eClaim form. It'll look a lot like the purchase of service invoice form that you're used to filling out now. So let's click download, which is this little green button here. And when it's successfully downloaded, you'll see a check mark and succeeded beside it. On my computer, the eClaim form downloads here at the bottom for me to open it. So that's where I'll open it. And before we get into the eClaim form, the most important thing to do here is to save it. So I'll save it as a document, a PDF document, onto my desktop or anywhere on your local computer, and click Save. So that's the most important thing to do first. And once I'm ready, I'm going to go ahead and open up that document that I saved. And so let's review this form together. So once we open the eClaim form, you'll see a few things: the client code and client name, the passport agency, your coordinator's name, and your coordinator's email address. So again, this is going to look very similar to the purchase of service invoice form that you're used to filling out, with a few slight differences. So the first thing you'll need to select is the payee information. So from here, we can select the drop down here, and it will give us a list of all the payees you have registered with the passport agency. In this case, there's only one. So we'll select the name of the person whose account we want the funds reimbursed to. Once you select your name or the payee's name, their telephone number will also automatically appear. Now, as we scroll down, we'll see some instructions. So the first is to fill out the eClaim to be reimbursed for purchase of services. Attach official receipts and invoices as proof of purchase. And one really important note, this third important note here, is that if you're submitting for support worker hours or mileage expenses, use page 2 of the purchase of service invoice form to collect signatures of support workers and service providers when it's required as proof of purchase. And the reason this is here is because as the temporary guidelines are in place due to COVID, signatures for support workers are not required at this time. And so when you're uploading it right now, you're not needed to submit an invoice with a signature on it because of the temporary expansion to the guidelines due to COVID. When we are uploading our receipts and invoices, I will show you how to get through this stage of the process without having the support worker's signature available because something does need to be uploaded there. But we'll get to this when we're uploading our eClaim as well as our receipts and invoices. Another really important note is that incomplete invoice forms will not be processed and will delay your payment. So it's really important that you go through this and fill it out correctly. This link does link you to the help section of the page that we just went over earlier. And of course, if you have any questions about the invoice itself, payment processing, or require any support, please contact your local passport agency. So the rest of this page may look familiar to you, but what we'll enter here is the total number of receipts and invoices. So let's say I have 10 receipts as an example. We can enter 10 here. And the amount you actually don't have to change, because as we work through the eClaim form, it'll automatically calculate all of the claims that you have. And lastly, we have the person managing funds. So it'll say, by completing this form, I acknowledge that you've signed a service agreement, you've not previously submitted the attached expenses, and that they comply with the passport program guidelines. So what we'll do here is you'll select your name as the person managing funds, and it'll appear on a drop-down list, and the day we've downloaded the invoice form will show here. So let's move on to page 2, which is the support worker hours and mileage section of the claim form. So again, all of the fields here will be a drop-down list. So if your support worker is registered with the passport program, you'll see them on a drop-down list here. For the purposes of training today, there isn't anybody registered, but in case you can't find your support worker's name on the drop-down list, you can always type their name into this field here. The next part will be service type, so you'll select the service type. The first being community participation supports activities of daily living. the second being education, and the third being respite. So once you've selected the service type, today I'll select service type 1, then we'll enter a start date and end date of the services as they were provided. So let's say our support worker worked from October 1st to October 30th. The date format will drop into this calendar here, so you can just select the date. And let's say we'll do 20 hours for the month, so you'll just type it into that box. And the rate was $20 an hour. As we move out of this section, you'll notice that the amount was automatically calculated. And as we move up here, you'll notice that now the total amount is automatically being kept track of as well. So if we have more than one support worker per month, you can just keep moving on here in terms of the form. So just 3 workers can be included per page here. So you'll see I'll added a test support worker 2, and let's say this person did some education. And again, we'll add the start date and end date of this amount. So the same logic applies to each of these sections. So all of the date sections, you'll get a drop-down screen like this. If you have more than 2 or 3 support workers per month, what you can do is click this plus button here at the bottom of the page, and it'll actually give you several more lines. So you'll see here, it'll say support worker 4, 5, and 6. There is not a limit to how many pages you can add. So if you have more than 6, you can just keep adding pages, and it will continue to give you new line items. If you don't need a page, you can always remove the page here. If I've added one by accident, I can always click remove page here, and it'll ask me if I'm sure I want to delete it. So the next section we'll go over is mileage. So the same, again, it's going to be very similar going through this eClaim form here. So under support worker or service provider, again, if they're registered with the Passport program already, you'll see their name on a drop-down list. If not, we'll just type in their name here. We'll enter the dates. The distance they drove in kilometers, and then we'll also add a rate per kilometer. Of course, the rate that you're paying somebody per kilometer, as well as the support worker hourly rate, is all dependent on your agreement with the support worker. So I'm just using 55 cents here as an example. If you wanted to add a flat rate for either mileage or the support worker hours, what I would suggest doing is adding 1 hour times the hourly rate, which will be your flat rate. Let's say you paid $300 for the month, then you would add 1 hour times 300, and that Passport 1 will know when processing this claim that it's a flat rate. If you wanted to remove a line item, so if I've added one by mistake here, I can click this X button and it'll remove all the work just on this one line item. So let's go over page 3 and page 4 now. So page 3 is for community participation, person-directed planning, and administration. So again, it's very similar to page 2, where if the program's already registered in the Passport program, so you've already used the service or went to a program, it'll show here in a drop-down list. But if not, there's nothing to worry about. You can always just type their name in here. Let's say it was a museum. We'll type in museum, select the service type. So these service types are identical to what you'll see on page 3 of your purchase of service invoice form. The museum is a community event, so let's click that. The start date will be the day you went to the museum or the client went to the museum. So let's say that's October 30th. And add an invoice number. If you don't have an invoice number on the receipt or on the invoice, what we ask is that you just type in Y, indicating Y for yes, meaning that there is a receipt attached to this claim. And then we'll put in the amount of the ticket. Again, you'll go through this page here, you'll see there's 3 line items for community participation, but if you have more than 3 receipts or invoices you want to submit, you can always click the plus button and get additional pages as well. So as we move through the rest of this form, you'll notice it's very similar. So for person-directed planning, you're adding the name of the agency or organization, the name of the planning facilitator, start date, end date, the invoice and receipt number, and amount. There's also the out-of-province box on all of these line items here, and you can just check it off to indicate that the service took place outside of Ontario if it did. And the next section is administration. So again, it'll appear in a drop-down list if the person's already registered with the passport program. If not, just manually type in their name. We have the dates, the invoice and receipt number, the amount, and the province box. And the last page is for all other claims, and it's for these service types, again, which are identical to your purchase of service invoice form that you've been using up until now. We have support worker vacation expenses while accompanying a client, support worker meals, supplies required to participate in an activity, and all other types. So the same rules or logic applies here, where you can drop down into the service provider or manually type in their name, enter the service type, the start date, the end date, the invoice or receipt number, and the amount. So for today, let's say we're just going to submit a museum ticket as well as some support worker hours. So once I filled out the entire form, once again, I'll save it to my desktop. At this point, as the form is saving, if you missed, let's say, an hourly rate field or any other field, it'll let you know that there's a missing field you need to complete before actually saving the form. So once this form is done, we're almost there to submit it to Passport One to be reimbursed.